development of the UK over the last couple of years, we've seen a big shutdown in baseload power stations because they're too old and they're too polluting, and we're replacing them with a lot of wind, and that's increased the intermittency. Whereas before we could simply tell a power station to switch on, we can't tell the wind to blow faster, and we can't tell the sun to shine harder when we want to.
Sometimes you're needing to take wind energy while it's blowing, but you don't need the energy at that moment. Sometimes you're constrained about how much power you can put back out onto the network.
So there's a lot more electricity that's generated from intermittent sources that we can't control, but we still need to be able to deliver power to our consumers as and when they want it.
We're fortunate on CL&R to be able to deploy 6 different battery types. The primary reason for having 6 different batteries at various scales, some being large, some being medium and some being small, is that we can fit them across the entire range of our distribution network.
We tend to see voltage problems out on the long, stringy rural networks, and we tend to see overload problems on the short, fat urban networks, which is why within the CL&R programme we've gone to a dense urban network out of Rice-Carr and a very sparse rural network out of Denwick.
So before even we put the batteries in place, we were looking at what might happen and how we might use these batteries, particularly how we might use a battery instead of demand-side response or in conjunction with demand-side response. So we're going to see some real needles moving on some real substations as the batteries are switched on and off, and compared to the academic models for the experience we had predicted.
One of the low-carbon technologies that has become prevalent is photovoltaic cells on people's roofs. One of the impacts in that is that photovoltaic cells began to distribute themselves in a cluster, and some of those clusters were causing us a great amount of concern. One of our specific sites where we're looking at the impact of solar PV on the electricity network is at Maltby, a site just outside Sheffield. One of the benefits in having the energy storage system there is about capturing some of that solar PV that's being generated during the daytime and discharging it during the evening.
We're up here at Wooler, which is in Northumberland. Today we've been delivering the equipment onto site, which is part of the electrical energy storage system.
One of the problems that we have in a village like Wooler is the infrastructure is very old, and it's very expensive to excavate streets to put in new distribution feeders. And what we're hoping this equipment will be able to do is to take some of the load off of those aging feeders and transformers and prolong the life remaining in those system components.
I think where the customer-led network revolution really does distinguish itself from what's gone before, it's the integration of that storage with the other technical solutions of voltage control or real-time thermal rating, along with the customer solutions of demand-side response. So it's bringing it all together and using energy storage as part of the mix in terms of being a solution for the future.
Storage is widely recognised as being one of the key technologies that needs to play a big part in the smart grid, alongside other flexibility like demand-side response, for example. But what hasn't really been explored is the economics of it and the business case. We are building Europe's largest battery energy storage facility, and it's probably the first practical demonstration of actually operating storage in multiple markets in the UK.
The bare component, kind of the battery cell, we've got just over 50,000 of those. They're arranged in just over 3,000 trays. It's 6 megawatt throughput, 10 megawatt hour lithium-ion battery, enough for about 430,000 people to make a cup of tea, which is quite a lot.
It's been really important for us as UK Power Networks to keep the community engaged and on board with the project. Right from the very beginning, we had to go through a full planning consent process for the development here. So we engaged a lot with the residents then and asked feedback about the look and feel of the building, and I think that's been really appreciated actually.
One of the most important things to sort of recognize is that a battery or a wind turbine or a hospital, they don't sit in isolation, they all sit together on the grid. And by making them work together, we generate as much value as possible, and we increase the value to all of them, to each other.
One of the biggest benefits is being able to defer some network reinforcement that we'd otherwise be having to do at site now. So that would involve installing a very long new overhead line circuit and an extra transformer. But that's not the only benefit that we're trying to get here, and in fact it's not enough to justify the economic case as a whole. So what we're looking at filling the gap with is using some of the capacity in the battery to help stabilise the wider electricity system, just in case there are faults or outages elsewhere on the system. And then another one is trying to stabilise the frequency of the network. So the frequency of our network in the UK is 50 Hertz everywhere, and National Grid's role is to try and maintain that as close as possible. And we can help do that by either absorbing or injecting power into the grid in real time.